Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. A bit more of a somber show, given what the events that transpired over the weekend. What do we have, Crystal?
Indeed, we do. So obviously, we're going to dig into all aspects of the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, what it means now, what it means for the future. And as we do on the show, we have a variety of perspectives across the ideological spectrum in order to bring you that information. We've got Rachel Bovard on for a conservatives' take on who the likely nominees are going to be from Trump. We've got David Sirota on to talk about what the left should be and how aggressively they should push back. We also have Kyle Kondik on. We're actually really fortunate to have him this morning. They have some exclusive new polling that will be dropping this AM, so we'll talk to him about sort of the political implications here. But let's just start with the news, what we learned over the weekend and where we are.
Yeah, that's right. So we learned, obviously, on Friday night around 7 p.m. that Justice Ginsburg had died. Almost immediately, the political jockeying kind of began.
Oh my God.
That night, Mitch McConnell put out a statement saying President Trump's nominee will receive a vote on the floor of the United States Senate. The president then held a rally on Saturday after a surreal moment, if you haven't seen it, in which he actually learned live of the news of RBG's death. But the president then held a rally on Saturday committing to name a nominee this week, which was confirmed this morning by the White House press secretary. Let's take a listen to what Trump said over the weekend.
So we will uphold equal justice under the law for citizens of every race, color, religion, and creed. I will be putting forth a nominee next week. It will be a woman.
Live by the identity politics, die by the identity politics.
Some good old conservative identity politics thrown in there. But, you know, Crystal, I mean, that kind of answered the question on everybody's mind, which is what are they actually going to do? And the more that we kind of learn what the whip count is, and I mean the amount of Republicans that would actually go along with McConnell's strategy, it's looking pretty good for them. So we actually have several of the statements. So remember that 53 votes, of course, that the Republicans have currently. They could have up to 50, in which Vice President Pence would be the tie-breaking vote because we no longer have a filibuster on Supreme Court nominees as of, I believe, Justice Gorsuch. So the couple of the defectors that we knew of, there are 4 likely. 2 have already come out. Susan Collins was the very first one. Let's put that up there on the screen where she talked about, obviously, she's in a very tight race with Sarah Gideon in the state of Maine.
It's actually not that tight. She looks like she's losing fairly badly at this point.
Well, as of this morning, it is no longer a toss-up and much more like a lean D seat. But she says in order for the American people to have faith in their elected officials, we must act fairly and consistently, no matter which political party is in power. And she says, I would have no objection to beginning the process of reviewing this nominee's credentials, but she just wants to wait until after the election for a vote such as this. Lisa Murkowski, the senator from Alaska, also came out with a similar statement in which she said that she was going to abide by the standards set previously and that I did not support taking up a nomination 8 months before the 2016 election to fill the vacancy of Justice Scalia. We are now closer to the 2020 election, less than 2 months out. I believe the same standard must apply. So that is 2 votes.
Yeah.
They could lose, I guess, 2 more. One more. Now, the possibles are Cory Gardner and Mitt Romney. We thought that some swing state Republicans might defect or not. Let's throw Senator Thom Tillis up there. He's in a, I guess, similarly tight situation where he's down significantly, says there's a clear choice. He will be supporting it. So those are kind of the political dynamics at play for everybody.
Yeah, well, and of course, I mean, the backstory here, as people, of course, probably know, is that Republicans, with Mitch McConnell in charge, held up Merrick Garland. He didn't even get a hearing on the floor of the Senate for 9 months because they said, oh, it's too close to the presidential election, so we can't do this. So you have all kinds of Republicans, Chuck Grassley, Lindsey Graham, and others on record backing this principle of, like, we can't do a Supreme Court nomination this close to election. And so the hypocrisy here is clearly obvious, and it's a very just like naked power grab. But at this point, you only have a couple of people whose political interest it may be in to not go forward with a vote. Collins and Murkowski are clear examples. Maybe Gardner. You know, we talked to a North Carolina reporter last week about the dynamics on the ground there, and this gives you a sense of, like, even Thom Tillis, who's in this swing state of North Carolina, where I don't think that this Supreme Court situation is going to be good for him politically, but he can't defect because his softness is on the Republican base who thinks that he hasn't been Trumpy enough. So those are kind of the political dynamics at play here. I mean, I think both of our reaction to the news on Friday night was sort of similar because, of course, we've been covering here and we've all been living through the fact that we have this incredibly high stakes, drama-ridden existential politics already, with the tension so incredibly high. And we all, of course, lived through the incredibly tense and fraught Kavanaugh hearings. This seems like it's an even further escalation from that. So if it was possible for our politics to become even more heated, even more tense, even more fraught, this development just turns up the temperature 1,000 degrees.
Yeah, that was my immediate, it was awful because I actually had to react live to the news on Fox News, and I didn't exactly say what most of them wanted to hear. I was like, look, I think this is bad. I mean, I think this is going to make things worse. I was like, tensions are already very high in this country. They're like, oh, he's a liberal because he's afraid of the left. I'm like, listen, people. It is not good, I think, for the health of the country in order for something like this to happen. But it is what it is. And I think we need to honestly here present to you what the political dynamics are at play. Because as you just pointed out, a lot of people can't understand this. But if you're Tom Tillis and you don't do this, the majority Republican support that you might be able to count on, like the absolute will come to the polls no matter what Republicans, you're dead. They won't come out for you.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing for Cory Gardner, which is that Cory's probably going to lose anyway, but if he wants even a fighting chance, like if he doesn't want to get totally blown out, you actually have to do this. And this is part of what I think the hellish part of this moment and the political system and how they have turned Supreme Court politics is they put a gun to your head and they make it so that it's so existential that people harden in place. That's what happened during Kavanaugh. During Kavanaugh, Democrats raised, significant sums of money. If you were a swing R in a lean D district, you were dead. And if you were a swing R in a lean R place, you were saved. I mean, people like Marsha Blackburn and others, they won by 7-10 points because of Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where no matter, it's just like one of the most partisan, hardening events. And that really is what a lot of these culture war things come down to. And I think it just robs you of any sort of substantive discussion. It's going to turn the needle up, by 15 degrees, 30 degrees. And it's just like, did we really need this? Like, is this really what we needed right now? That was my immediate reaction.
2020 has just been tailor-made to exacerbate every existing division in American life, whether it's class divisions, race divisions, ideological divisions, geographic divisions, and this just further pulls people apart. In 2018, I was privy to some of the internal polling of Democrats running in tough districts, trying to overcome that hardened partisanship, and many of them were up or at tied before the Kavanaugh hearings broke. And that hardening that you're talking about, it just made it so that the D's went home, the R's went home, the polling in Senator Manchin's race, I mean, I was privy to some of that internal polling, and he polled on okay, if I voted for Kavanaugh, what does it look like? And if I don't, what does it look like? And he likely would have lost re-election if he didn't vote for Kavanaugh, because of that partisan hardening. I think it's worth reflecting on the fact that it feels like the Supreme Court has always been this just completely political, polarized institution. And in a way, it, of course, has always been a political institution. But even as recently, I was looking at John Roberts.
Yeah.
78 senators voted to confirm him. It used to be that presidents would actually pick nominees so that they could win a large bipartisan consensus. I mean, Joe Biden, Democrats were in charge of the Senate. He was their judiciary chair, much to many people, including my chagrin, when Clarence Thomas ended up getting confirmed. So there used to be at least a theater around, we're going to get everybody more or less on board. We're going to get a broad majority on board with whoever we put on the Supreme Court to maintain its legitimacy as this above politics type of body. And like I said, that was always somewhat of a fiction, but now there is no fiction. It is just stripped down to its bare bones. And the last thing I'll say here is it's a real sign of how decayed and how troubled our nation is that something that happens in the normal course of political events, right? Supreme Court vacancies are not that unusual. They happen in the normal course of our politics, and they have not always been a crisis level event. The fact that we are at a place now where a Supreme Court vacancy would essentially be an existential level, potentially like republic breaking type event tells you how sick and how damaged our country is to start
Yeah, I think that's the only really take that I kind of have to offer there, which is that, yeah, it's like if it's ready to exacerbate and if things are so wounded and our institutions are so decayed, I think Rostow put that, where an octogenarian's routine death can like cause a massive shock to the political system.
Right.
It's like maybe the Soviet Politburo was better governed than our current country. Like, what is this nonsense that we all have guns to our head? Look, nobody's going to change anybody's mind on abortion. It is what it is. And it's just like, now you have this partisan bickering war. I'm sure we're going to see the Handmaid's things again. And we're going to see, the churches are going to come out. And it's like, it's the same dynamic that happened during Kavanaugh. I didn't think it'd get worse. And now apparently it can.
Yeah.
And that's basically where we are.
And it's also because so little happened, because Congress is so gridlocked and because so much has been put onto the court that it has taken on this, this much larger, this judicial supremacy, like much larger role than it really should have, where it's no longer like a co-equal branch because the legislative branch has basically failed at being able to do anything and move the country forward. So instead, all these decisions get foisted onto what is now a completely political Supreme Court. So that's where we stand this morning. We've got a lot more for you, and we're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.